Welcome back. It is time to dive into the Xbox showcase, and it's been a damn interesting one. PlayStation had a bit of a rough time in terms of audience perception, same went for the Summer Games Fest. Xbox, though, seems to have completely knocked it out of the park. They have Gears of War, but it's the lads that everyone had a big old bromance with when they were teenagers. They're back. Perfect Dark is back. Kinda looks like Deus Ex. We've got Fable, we've got loads of gameplay footage, and ultimately it's Xbox almost feeling like they're back in the Xbox 360 era where they actually have got games to release. Now, of course, tonally, this is total whiplash, right? Like, Xbox have rightly been the punching bag for a long time. We had Phil Spencer just consuming studios, and then, of course, him going on to the cut cycle, cutting loads of studios, axing hundreds and hundreds, over 1,000, so many jobs. And, of course, all of that amid sales that absolutely have cratered for the Xbox, while also their Game Pass growth has really slowed down. That being said, when you put Call of Duty and Diablo onto Game Pass, well, I definitely wonder what those numbers will look like. My point is, though, it's been an incredibly mixed bag for Xbox. If you go into a physical game store, you will easily see PlayStation has maybe 3 times the shelf space that Xbox has, maybe even more. So it does feel totally insane that this set of reveals has been received amazingly well, but of course there is still that one nagging issue. The nagging issue is that nobody really trusts them. And of course that is most personified in the question, Phil Spencer. Why were Tango Gameworks shut down even when Hi-Fi Rush hit all of your goals and you were publicly lauding it as a massive success story? Why did you shut them down when other studios seemingly were not shut down? Please explain. We don't trust you. They made an amazing game that hit its financial goals, and their reward is they're shut down and we don't get any more of that game. That is still a fundamental thing deep in audiences that they will have to overcome. And the only way to overcome that will, of course, be content. The Xbox Showcase was easily the biggest thing of the weekend. Of course, we had other things, right? Like the Summer Games Fest. Summer Games Fest was interesting. I think as an actual stream format, as a show format, it was significantly better than usual. It actually acknowledged industry troubles, and it focused more on solo devs and indie teams. I really did like that. There was a bit of a drama coming out about how much the show charges like larger brands. It's like, oh, 250 grand for whatever length of trailer. And I think a lot of the news websites, they kind of went straight to print with that, almost as if it was some sort of large, shocking thing, where of course this is entirely standard for a marketing event. The bit that maybe didn't get as much of an emphasis is that in an editorial capacity, they do quite a lot of free slots as well for indie teams, for non-AAA games basically, that they think are cool and want to support. So that was a little bit of drama. I think it was one of those situations where the headlines were certainly quite eye-catching. When you actually went into lots of those articles, though, they did actually mention the editorial stuff. I think just a lot of devs in the industry, they just kind of came out to say, oh no, actually, they do actually try to care about us indies as well. But of course, for a lot of audiences, indies are great, but they really want to see where the big bucks are going, and that is exactly why things went well for Xbox. Take a look at this, right? This is Jeff Keighley's poll. So Jeff has been doing polls, just like this one, for all the big events. You can see here, 65.7% giving it an A. This is night and day compared to the other showcases. Extremely positive, easily the most positive by a wide margin. And of course, if you're wondering why, it's pretty damn simple. They had a lot of games. And that's the sort of thing that can happen when you just gobble up a large portion of the industry. But that in itself, of course, is a long-term strategy, and that is why Xbox has had years like 2022, when they released less than 5 exclusive titles as a publisher. But now that a lot of that work is actually sort of coming to fruition, they've been able to show off 31 games in 1 hour, where 17 are first-party titles and even more are console exclusives. It was a hell of a lot of games, and because Microsoft have a lot of money and bought quite a lot of large studios, a significant chunk are big-budget AAA franchise titles. Of course, yes, we love indies. We, in fact, are an indie studio as well, and indies have been carrying 2024 in terms of really good, high-quality games. But for general audiences, what they want is a big big budget action game in a franchise that they recognize, and that's what Xbox came to do. We've got Fable reminding us that it exists. We've got Perfect Dark. Now, Perfect Dark, that's been an interesting one. One of those quadruple A titles that everybody thought would never really come out, but some things changed with development, and now it pretty much is Perfect Dark mixed with Deus Ex, which honestly I'm pretty here for. We've got Gears of War with Marcus and Dom, and Mad World chords being played, which is quite funny. And then also the Coalition confirming they will be returning to a full Gears of War 6. We had big cinematics for World of Warcraft and Diablo 4, and then the promise of way more games. We got South of Midnight, we've got Avowed, and then of course the shadow drop in the form of Starfield's first big content update and the modding tools alongside a set of pre-built mods to buy. So that's a lot of pretty damn big things. Of course, texture being added to that with a bunch of AA and indie titles to kind of break up the show. It was a lot. I mean, you had plenty of games for the Xbox 360 generation, of course, Fable, Gears of War, for people wanting the big multi-plat titles and all the Game Pass stuff. They're happy. Like, they really did have a lot, including things that people were not really expecting. That said, there were two big things that didn't happen that people thought may happen. One of them was a rumored handheld console. Yes, that would basically be Microsoft themselves taking on Asus, taking on Valve, and doing an Xbox-focused handheld. This is something that Phil Spencer has actually talked about fairly openly. So the rumored handheld didn't appear. It was teased a bit later on, and I think it could be a major strategic move for Microsoft to make. You see, a real strength that they could have is doing this with a massive scale, right? So getting some of those really good scale economics and basically taking the war to the other people. Of course, yes, there's the existing PC and, Linux-based handhelds, but Nintendo. Now, obviously, Nintendo have got their first-party games, and those are not going to be coming out in some Xbox handheld. Thing is, though, if somebody knew that they could have an Xbox handheld that could have pretty damn good docked performance, solid handheld performance, and of course, a massive catalog of games, that could be extremely strong. And what could make that even more strong is that Microsoft have got quite a lot of experience trying to get things going on ARM instead of x86. I won't get into the hardware nerd stuff, but basically, all of the gains that Tim Apple got with this generation and beyond of laptops doing Apple Silicon, well, Microsoft should be able to tap into that fairly soon, of course, because of the new chips that Qualcomm have got coming out. That, if it was to be applied to this use case, would be extremely interesting. Anyway, though, it didn't happen, but it was teased. I'd be excited about it for sure. Another thing is ActiBlizz's back catalog to Game Pass. A lot of people expected that, and it did not happen. Broadly, though, this is Xbox finally making good on things. They have been winding up to take their swing for a long-ass time, and they have been suffering for it. It basically has cost them this console generation up to now. And there is always the constant question of, why have they bought all these teams, and where are the games? Where is Fable? What the hell is going on? Perfect Dark, is that ever going to happen? That is what people were saying. And they were right to. While Microsoft had that absolute desert of games, what was Sony doing? They were doing God of War. They had more Last of Us. They had so many big, heavy hitters, Spider-Man as well. But now we're entering that latter half of this console cycle, and this is where it gets interesting. Last year I said that I thought that Sony were going to be pretty dominant in the short term, but that Microsoft have major strategic advantages that would only really come into play as we entered the latter half of this console cycle. I think we're actually seeing a little bit of that now. Another thing that is a little bit new is these different studios collaborating with each other. As an example, Undead Labs, who've been working on State of Decay 3, well, they've actually been working with Coalition. They've also been working with Obsidian. So it basically means that these companies can share some of their expertise, right? As an example, the Coalition, them working on Gears of War E-Day, means that they're going to understand Unreal Engine 5 really well. And with Obsidian, obviously, they've got experience with co-op games because of Grounded. So all of that stuff can help State of Decay. What's also important is how this is being presented. It's really less of a Call of Duty industrial complex, all of you will be fed into Warzone, and seemingly far more about the sharing of skills now that they have so many studios and therefore have got access to so much talent. And as for the Call of Duty industrial complex, well, it's creating games that are going to require an internet connection at all times for texture streaming, and they are confusing audiences by asking for a 300 gigabyte download. That's because, well, bundled in the Call of Duty launcher, I think Call of Duty HQ it's called, you have got Modern Warfare 2, Modern Warfare 3, Warzone, DMZ, Zombies, and, Black Ops 6. Bit of an oof, and now that the foregrounding's done, let's just hop into some of the games. So, the 2024 exclusives are Dungeons of Hinterberg, Stalker 2, Heart of Chernobyl on September 5th. We've got Age of Mythology Untold, September 24th. I'm extremely excited about that. Diablo 4 Vessel of Hatred, October 8th. Gotta say, say what you want about the in-game stuff, but man, that cinematic was, that was some fun, fleshy business. I will say, Season 4 is much better. Right, much better than prior seasons. And it's a little bit like Loot 2.0. Loot 2.0 went a massive way to helping Diablo 3, but it was Reaper of Souls that then added in the content and the features to make good on that foundation. That's what Vessel of Hatred will have to do. We then have Avowed, which may be November 12th. We have Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024, November 19th. So you can basically see they have a torrent of games. But then also in 2024, this is just going on to some stuff that isn't precisely dated, there's Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, Starfield Shattered Space, Ara Histories Untold, and 33 Immortals. That is what they've got for the rest of 2024. Compare that to 2023, and I think you'll see quite a difference in the quantity of games. To move into 2025 then, we have got Doom the Dark Ages, which basically is the successor to Doom Eternal. However, we're doing a bit more of a medieval thing. Looks pretty cool. We got South of Midnight, which I've got to say, that art style is absolutely stunning. I think it's incredibly impressive that they've been able to, with their in-game presentation, actually land the look and the feel of that big trailer. It's definitely one of the ones I'm the most looking forward to. I love that vibe. I love just even the music that they're playing. It's great. Then Fable, also 2025, as well as Winter Burrow. But we do have plenty of games beyond that. So undated are State of Decay 3, Perfect Dark, Gears of War E-Day, Clockwork Revolution, and OD, which is the Kojima Xbox game. There's Ark 2, Contraband, and finally Replaced. That's a lot of bloody video games. So, in addition to all of the AA's and the indies on Game Pass, what you can see there is Xbox has got multiple releases every month. In Awesome 2024, they will be releasing more games that they did in the entirety of 2022. And then for 2025 already, they have 3 very big name AAA titles and even more stuff percolating in the background. And yeah, there's stuff there that is undated, but honestly, in the modern industry, I don't see that as really much of a red flag. I think there have been so many cautionary tales, of course, ones like Halo Infinite that have been very keenly felt by the people at Microsoft. So I think because of that, they probably will only give dates when they really do feel sure. Even take Perfect Dark. That's an interesting one. So it was being made at this new studio that they founded, right? And they said it was going to be a quadruple A game and all of this stuff that had us rolling our eyes. And it was said to be in development hell. However, right, what then happened is they struck a deal with Crystal Dynamics, where Crystal Dynamics would take over as the lead studio. Of course, if you look at Crystal Dynamics, one thing's for sure. They can just sit down, go to work, and make a shitload of content. And it does seem that's what they're doing here. And for some insight into that, here's what Jeff Grubb, who is a notable industry person, he definitely, he's got his little birds at all the different studios who speak rumors to him. So he said this: Perfect Dark is not in development hell. After talking with more people who have knowledge of the game, they said that while it may be rough in some areas, it looks great in others. So really, to me, these dateless games, I think, are there so that if development slows down, there won't be much drama, right? It'll just be them shifting an internal release date rather than an external one, and then having to deal with the marketing fallback. So I think what we can see is that to a degree, the pipeline has been sorted out. They actually are going to have the content, and you'd bloody well hope so given how many studios they now own. And that means it's going to be all about marketing and strategy. They have got a mountain to climb, and that's because Xbox does not have the premium brand image of Sony. Sony has had a brilliant console with a lot of brilliant games with premium prices, and even with those games being so expensive, people have actually enjoyed them a hell of a lot because they have been backed up by quality. Xbox, though, have had a interesting relationship with the quality of their releases over the last while, but also Games Pass has always been presented as this kind of, bang for your buck king. You had the Series S, so In a way with Xbox, yeah, you'd feel like your money could go a little bit further, but it didn't really have that premium brand image that has served Sony so very well. That's the sort of thing that they're going to need to fix. That, of course, and trust. Trust with their developers and trust with their audience. And that's why, even though I think this was a spectacular showcase, it really had to be. It couldn't be anything other than that. I mean, if it was just good, they would still be left in a really bad position because in terms of public awareness, they have had an absolutely abominable, terrible first half of 2024. Mass layoffs with Activision, the chaos of the reactions to their decisions to put games on PlayStation. Remember all of the Team Green, the people that bleed green, they love Xbox so much, basically having their public meltdowns of like, oh my god, did I back the wrong side? Then the rumors of Halo going to PlayStation, the closure of multiple studios like Arcane Austin and Tango Gameworks, it has been absolutely shite. And that's why there is an undercurrent of doubt amongst quite a few industry onlookers, right? A lot of people saying, this is really good, but do you know what Microsoft is really good at? It's good at snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. Imran Khan making the very good point of taking a game like South of Midnight. It looks, to me, amazing. I love the sort of the culture and the music that they're going for. It looks like a creatively interesting game. It is visually gorgeous, but I think we could all project that it's not going to be the biggest seller ever. So in a world where the reward for doing a hi-fi rush is being shut down, is there any reason to trust them? People broadly thinking, wow, that's a lot of great games. I wonder how many of these studios will then be executed. Now, speaking of numbers and executions, one way that these companies hope to, I suppose, avoid having to execute their teams is to increase their numbers by going multi-plat. We've seen a little bit of that over the weekend. So PlayStation revealed that LEGO Horizon Adventures is day one, PlayStation, PC, and Nintendo Switch. That's actually pretty major. Those games sell absolute, just humongous copies, and now it's going to be on the Switch. Another example of that is one that I actually didn't think we would see, and that is Phil Spencer confirming to IGN that Doom: The Dark Ages will actually be on the PlayStation day one. So it's not going to be Xbox only, but of course, versus Sony, Microsoft are also counting in something. They're basically counting on the day one Game Pass thing being such a large draw that, yeah, they can release a bunch of their games multi-plat everywhere, but eventually people will start to say, hang on a second, I have bought 3 games from Microsoft on my PlayStation. If I had Games Pass, I'd only be paying a few bucks a month and I'd have all of those video games and I wouldn't have to pay more money. That's obviously the strategy they're going for. I think it's also a pretty smart strategy. Now, it is kind of interesting because he went on to say that basically he had a meeting with Marty Stratton. Marty is the studio director of id, and basically Marty said, I want to do every platform, and Phil agreed. So kind of interesting that he was able to have that much sway. Maybe that's one landmine at least diffused a little bit. So that's good, but of course, if you're IGN and you're in a room with Phil Spencer, you have obviously got to ask him the question about the big elephant in the room, the 4 studios that just got closed. So fortunately, IGN did challenge him on that. And unfortunately, we basically got the same thing. He did that thing where he put the focus on individual developers rather than the action that was taken. This is what Phil said. In the end, I've said over and over, I have to run a sustainable business inside the company and grow, and that means sometimes I have to make hard decisions that frankly are not decisions I love, but decisions that somebody needs to make. I suppose I maybe think about the opening miniseries of Battlestar Galactica, where some compartments of the ship need to be vented or else the fuel lines will ignite and they'll lose the ship. But guess what? There's people in those compartments, and it's one of those things where it's like, tough call, but I need to hit the button that kills everyone. Of course, the difference here is that this is not a life or death scenario, and many people would challenge Phil saying, but surely your short-term financial interest that led to you shutting down Tango Gameworks is going to bite you in the ass in the long run, because those were incredible developers who made an incredible game that truly could have grown into more. And we just never see Phil actually engage on that point. So I suppose always remember, if you zoom it in to people, to individuals, it actually makes it so much easier to let the real systemic problem just float on by. And that's what Phil was doing. I think Microsoft PR have pretty obviously schooled him on that. I do think that they're right to do that. I do think that Phil's answer is, in terms of his objectives, a really good answer, but obviously, given our interests, it's a pretty horrible answer. It just means that as good as all of this looks, Phil has clearly signaled, if things go rough, there will be cuts. But there is then the sort of thing where a lot of people, they have troubled trust on that, because those cuts just don't seem to happen evenly across the different parts of the company. That's it for today's video, though. Look, very strong showing, lots of stuff that I'm certainly very interested in. I mean, World of Warcraft stuff, big thumb up. That expansion's actually shaping up to be pretty damn great, and a lot of these games look fantastic. I'm still sad that, you know, Deus Ex Mankind Divided is the last one, probably, but if Perfect Dark can carry some of that forward, I would be pretty excited. To draw it to a close then, let's talk about some key takeaways. Number 1, Call of Duty going on to Game Pass, Diablo being in Game Pass, and probably more Blizzard stuff. That is, I think, going to have a meaningful, positive impact on their numbers, and I'll be fascinated to see if we actually get any more reporting there, or maybe if the industry analysts who, you know, have ways to measure this kind of thing, if they end up saying anything. And it certainly looks like the highly successful model of, you know, Game Pass plus a premium upgrade that they did with Starfield, it does seem that that's what will continue. Ultimately, though, I think they are positioned extremely strongly for the latter half of the console cycle. The question is, people don't own Xboxes, but they do own a lot of PCs. And if they can get this stuff going good in PC, they actually could achieve some meaningful results. As an example, Helldivers 2, the absolute amazing success story for Sony, has earned most of its money on PC. And that just goes to show how important PC is in the modern landscape, and that is somewhere where Microsoft are fairly well positioned. So if they can do well in PC, and if they can have some sort of handheld that could maybe end up being competitive with Nintendo, and in terms of a first-party, like, high-quality experience, also competitive with Valve and the ROG Ally, then I think we could be going somewhere interesting. But anyway, that is it for me. Let me know, what are your favorite games, what are your takeaways, and of course, I'll be back tomorrow because we have got a lot of things to talk about.